The movie begins with a woman named Liz sitting in a prison meeting room, waiting for a man named Ted to see her. Liz asks Ted if he remembers when they first met, taking us back to 1969. At that time, Liz, a single mother, is at a college bar feeling out of place. She encounters a charming stranger named Ted Bundy, who has been smiling at her from a distance. Ted puts a quarter in the jukebox to play a song, inviting Liz to dance with him. They go home together, and although Liz understands that Ted doesn't want to come inside because of her baby, he expresses his willingness to do so. They spend the night together platonically, and the next morning, Liz wakes up to find Ted missing. However, she soon discovers him making breakfast with her daughter Molly. They continue their relationship and live as a happy family, captured through footage of their time together. However, their lives take a drastic turn when news reports emerge of a series of gruesome murders committed by a man with a cast on his arm. Witnesses identified the suspect as a man resembling Ted. As Ted drives one night, he is pulled over by a policeman and arrested for multiple traffic violations. Despite Ted's polite explanation that he is a law student returning home with his girlfriend waiting for him, the officer remains suspicious. Ted becomes a suspect in the attempted kidnapping of a woman named Carol Duranch. With the help of his lawyer John O'Connell, Ted's bail is reduced, allowing him to be reunited with Liz. When Ted finally meets Liz again, she is furious with him for his arrest, feeling hurt that he didn't share the details of what happened that evening. They go out for dinner, where Ted explains the circumstances leading to his arrest, suspecting a setup and being followed by a black car. Ted's lawyer, O'Connell, brings up the disappearances at Lake Sammamish during the kidnapping trial, exposing inconsistencies in the witness testimonies and suggesting police manipulation. Ted and Liz adopt a dog together, encounter Ted's acquaintance Carol, and return home to make love, planning their future. However, Ted is taken into custody the next day, forced to relinquish his belongings, and change into prison attire. He calls Liz, reassuring her and vowing to prove his innocence. Devastated by the verdict, Liz expresses her desire to visit Ted, but detectives inform her of his suspicion of crimes in Colorado, leaving her infuriated. In prison, Ted studies his case, but a detective confronts him about his presence in Colorado, leading to a defensive response and a revelation of Ted's lies. As the stress takes a toll on Liz, she turns to alcohol, and even O'Connell, unable to practice in Colorado, gives up as Ted's lawyer. Ted is subsequently transferred to a jail in Colorado. Liz's friend visits her, expressing her lack of trust in Ted, which offends Liz and leads to her kicking the friend out of her apartment. The next day, Ted calls Liz and informs her that he will be acting as co-counsel in his own case. Despite Liz's disinterest in talking, Ted continues to contact her, causing her growing frustration. In the subsequent trial, Ted is denied bail, and the prosecution seeks the death penalty. Ted contacts Liz to share the news, but she abruptly hangs up on him. In Aspen, Colorado, Ted faces trial for Karen Campbell's murder, held without bail while facing the possibility of the death penalty. His new lawyer, Jim Dumas, views the evidence as circumstantial. Ted begins plotting an escape, taking advantage of interviews with reporters while in prison to gain public sympathy. During a trial recess, Ted notices the guard's distraction with a woman in the audience and seizes the opportunity. Pretending to make a call to Liz, Ted escapes through a window and changes his clothes before disappearing. Authorities launch a search for him, while Liz learns about the escape from Joanna, who believes Ted won't seek refuge with Liz. After nearly a week of evading capture in the vast Colorado forest, Ted is eventually recaptured. Liz visits him briefly, conveying her inability to continue supporting him as his case worsens, leaving behind a drawing made by Molly. The next day, Liz removes Ted's picture from her desk and replaces it with the book he gave her when the chief first visited him in prison. During her break, her co-worker Jerry starts flirting with her. Ted writes Liz a letter, expressing that he can't live without her, and begins working on his next escape plan. He hangs Molly's drawing in his cell and obtains a job in prison that involves working with power tools. When the other inmates are away, Ted brings equipment into his cell and starts sawing the ceiling. Successfully, he escapes once again, and Liz learns about it through the news, realizing that her ex-boyfriend is on the loose. Ted ends up in Florida 2 weeks later, in January 1978, where he encounters 2 sorority girls who are later found murdered. Other female students are also reported to have been attacked while sleeping with a heavy wooden log. Ted is pulled over by a police officer, but he hits the cop and flees. However, he is eventually recaptured, and Sheriff Ken Kotzeres vows to ensure Ted receives a lengthy sentence. Photos of Ted's teeth are forcibly taken as he has a chip in the front, which matches a bite mark on one of the victims. As the media pays attention to Ted's case, he continues to portray himself as a victim, claiming mistreatment by the sheriff for personal gain. Ted repeatedly attempts to call Liz, but she refuses to answer. He gains a following from female fans due to his physical appearance, leading them to believe he is innocent. One of his old friends, Carol, whom he met at the animal shelter, visits him in jail and eventually moves to Florida to be closer to him. Meanwhile, Liz starts reading the book Ted gave her, and Jerry checks on her and is invited inside. Carol continues visiting Ted in prison, while Ted's lawyer informs him that his trial will be the first televised trial in history. The state offers Ted a deal to plead guilty to killing the sorority girls and receive life sentences instead of the death penalty, but Ted angrily refuses and seeks a lawyer to get out of the situation. In 1979, Ted's trial begins with Judge Edward T. Cowart presiding. Ted is allowed to defend himself, attempting to sway public opinion in his favor while denying the evidence against him. However, his behavior leads his defense attorney to quit. Ted grows closer to Carol Ann, but she believes he still loves Liz. In the final part of the story, Liz confronts Jerry about unplugging the phone at night to prevent Ted's calls. Initially upset, Liz eventually calms down and confesses to Jerry that she was the one who gave Ted's name to the police in Utah. During a trial hearing, Ted proposes to Carol, and they get legally married in a courthouse. Later, Carol becomes pregnant with Ted's child. The jury reaches its final verdict, finding Ted guilty on all charges. Judge Cowart sentences him to death by the electric chair. Carol Ann, Liz, and Ted's mother are devastated by the sentence, while Ted maintains his innocence. He attempts a final appeal, which the judge denies, and he is returned to prison. 10 years later, in 1989, Liz receives a final letter from Ted as he awaits his execution. She visits him in prison, seeking the truth since she can no longer bear the pain of not knowing. Ted still insists he didn't kill anyone, but Liz shows him a picture she received from Fisher of one of the victims, a decapitated woman. She asks Ted what happened to her, and he writes on the glass between them, "Hacksaw." A flashback reveals Ted luring the woman to his car with a fake cast, then brutally attacking her with a crowbar before dismembering her in the woods. Liz leaves the prison, quietly crying as she reflects on her time with Ted and realizes there were signs of his instability from the beginning. Outside, she reunites with Jerry and a now teenage Molly, who expresses her pride in her mother for finally finding closure. The movie concludes with the revelation that Ted was executed on January 24, 1989. While he confessed to over 30 murders, experts believe he may have killed many more. Liz and Molly Kendall continue to live in Washington state, where Liz has remained sober for decades. Carol gives birth to a girl, and the movie ends with the implication of new beginnings for the characters.